Well, hello everyone. My name is Cody Hall. I'm the host of The Faces, Entrepreneurs Are People, and the founder and CEO of Telehelping, virtual staffing organization, and the sponsor of this here podcast. So I appreciate the Telehelping team to allow me to spend time with great people like Boris every morning. How are you, Boris?
Doing well, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
I'm excited to have you on. It's a beautiful cold day here in Napa, so I'm excited to figure out like who am I chatting with here today. Why don't you take a moment and tell us like who Boris is?
Okay. Who am I? Let's see. Personally, before we get professionally, very inquisitive person. Always was really interested in kind of an academic life. Found out that I guess the strictures of academia can be a bit too much, and it's really tough to help people directly when there's some sort of scholastic agenda and you have to keep pushing them out year by year, semester by semester. Do they really get it? So there's an educational aspect of being an advisor where you sit with clients and you really get to know them one-on-one. So the more you get to know them, the more you know what makes them tick. You know what they really focus on, right? Because it was Carnegie, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. He always says there's two reasons for everything: the reason they tell you and the real reason, right? And that's the hard part, is getting to that real reason, because some of these tried and true sayings, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It rings true. It rings true. And the more you can get in their shoes and kind of see where they're coming from, the more you can kind of ease their concerns. And that's what we're all doing as financial advisors. Let's face it. Nobody really needs us just to go to the markets anymore, right? I mean, internet's there. Google anything and you're going to find it. But that's the thing. There's an overabundance of information, and that makes people actually more insecure, not less insecure, which has been the real irony of all this plethora of info. So that's where we come in. So I went independent almost 3 years ago. I've been in the industry since the late 90s. I'm dating myself. Been licensed since 98. And I've seen the industry take a lot of changes. But that was the reason I went independent, is because with the advent of AI, you're going to see some real changes in the industry going forward. And this is a great opportunity for people who are willing to carve out a niche and focus on those people who they can really speak with, right? Because there's something for everybody, right? I mean, just like an attorney or a doctor, you want to find the one that resonates with you, right? And so it's the same thing with advisors. And so that's why we kind of focus on our process and what's really important to them.
Right. Nice. And when you're not wearing the advisor hat.
Yeah. When I'm not wearing
who's that guy?
Who's that guy? That guy is a guy who's trying to slow down time. I'm like I said, I'm intensely curious. I'm a bookish person by nature. You'll see me at a movie theater, or you'll see me at a play, a lot of times at a cafe. I haunt bookstores. In fact, a friend of mine talked me into going to New York, and we're doing a whole bookstore weekend of hitting different ones that I'd seen online. One of my favorite ones is in Brooklyn, Center for Fiction. So anybody that's out there, you really got to check that place out. It's very impressive. And they have a nice cafe. They even serve drinks there. So,
that's great. I was in the southeast corridor of Mexico City in Ciudad de Mexico. And my wife and I were just walking around. This must have been, 3 or 4 years ago now. Right. And we stumbled across this little bookstore that was just down into this corridor, right? Off the street, down the stairs, right? Really shady kind of bookstore, good feel. And what great is like this labyrinth of just narrow pathways of walls lined with books that led to other little rooms that were lined with books, and then it led to other little corridors that had more rooms. And it seemed almost infinite. And it was, most, if not all, Spanish books, but it was just like, it was just like a representation to me of like the internet in a physical location. It's like it's just all stored somewhere. And
Right.
there's just, you know, at one point in time I was like walking through this, and like at every point in time, every one of these books were
Mhm.
being, you know, created by a publishing agency, written by a person. They were someone's life work or someone's summation of their discovery, and they were like all in their own right and time critically important, right, to something or someone or some genre. And I think that's really cool when you walk through a bookstore like that. You're, you know, you're experiencing things, and as they kind of like happen in this time log. So it's pretty cool. I love bookstore. I love the smell of books.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Old books, new books, same here. I have a Kindle and I'll use it for the really big books I don't feel like looking around. Like I read Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged because it's like 1,400 pages. And if you've seen the book, it's like a dictionary. So that was better on Kindle. But you do remember more when you have more senses, right? The smell, the feel, the way the light reflects off the page. This stuff does, you know, encode the memories deeper. So yeah, when I read a book, what I do now is I will check out a book in the library first. And if I like it, then I'll buy it for the permanent collection. If it's something I feel I won't read again, why, right? I don't have an infinite amount of room. As much as a bibliophile as I am, I have to start cutting back.
Yeah, you know, I think for bookstores, for me, the smell reminds me of my great aunt and great uncle's antique store.
Mm,
So they were one of those folks that, you know, he had retired from the post office. She retired from being a teacher in middle of nowhere, Georgia,
right,
and they had property that ran along a major state highway that wasn't an interstate, but it was a major state highway, and
right.
they just had a bookstore at the front end of their property.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't anything impressive, right? It's like, you know, you could drive by to see antiques, and they had assortment of antique books and furniture and coins and jewelry, and just that smell of that, it was just, you know, smells like history.
Oh, yeah.
And so yeah, and I like that about books is, you know, I read to my son every night in Spanish, and what I like about books is you have to pause and then flip the page, right?
Right,
So it's not like a movie where it's just like you just keep going, or even on a Kindle you just keep swiping. You
right,
know, there's a bottom to every page, so there's a pausing moment. I'm like, well, let's get to the other side of this. Like, what's going on? And
right.
so I like that about books.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah. Congrats on teaching your son Spanish.
Oh, my kids are all native Spanish speakers. And
Oh,
so
really?
my wife is Mexican.
Okay.
Both of my kids' primary language is Spanish. And so um,
Sí, hablas muy bien por un gringo, as we would say.
it's para mí es muy importante. Yo viví en México para 5 años.
O sea, ¿en
Sí.
la Ciudad de México o
Ah, no, Guadalajara. Pero
Guadalajara?
especial en, ¿conoces Chapala?
No, no, no. Nunca he ido a Guadalajara, solamente la ciudad, por supuesto, Tijuana. Uh,
Ah.
so, I did go to Puerto Vallarta and I've been to Cancun. That's about it.
Oh, I want to move to Puerto Vallarta. My wife and I have been having the conversation. Like, we like Guadalajara. We specifically live in a pueblo, Jijic, which is cerca de Guadalajara, pero it's like 45 minutes south. Right. So there's this huge mountain range that divides Guadalajara from the largest lake in Mexico. And so, and it's like a mini Grand Lake. You can't see all the way to the other side of it. You can drive for hours along it. To get to the other side, it's a 4 hour drive if you want to go just from my place to the other side, which is in Michigan. And so, you know, we love that area, really great. It's just so sleepy, and which has been awesome, right?
Right.
Since our most recent son's only 2, it's been great to just kind of exist in a very slow world, right?
Right.
But you know, I think we want to move to the beach. My wife's a very big beach person, and we like, you know, when you're not on these calls and working and everything, it's just nice to be able to just hop out. You know, it's
Yeah.
like hop out in the sand, and you know, on the weekends, and you know, we're hangout people, and so we are not exciting outside of work. Like, we're just like, all right, we gotta entertain them, and then also ourselves try not to go crazy and be bored.
Right. 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 I mean, it sounds like you got to figure it out. I'm too busy doing this to think about retirement, but or working too remotely. I still love Los Angeles. There's still a lot to do here. Less and less now that the traffic's getting worse and worse. More and more people are kind of being relegated to their neighborhoods. So it's become kind of like little fiefdoms all around. So I have friends that are only 20 miles away that I only see twice a year because 20 miles equals 45 minutes to an hour.
Correct. I remember when I first moved to LA, I moved to Chino Hills, right? And I thought that was LA, right? Like,
Right.
you look at a map, you're like, I'm in LA. But what you don't know is Chino Hills is about an hour and 40 minutes from downtown LA, right?
Yep.
As a crow flies, very close. but if you jump on the the 60 coming into the 5 and this, trying to get over to the 605 or the 710, it's like it's gonna take you forever to get there. And I only lived there for the term of my first lease because I was like, I found myself always wanting to go to LA and LA being a year away. But I do.
Right.
LA is beautiful though. I mean, it's despite the fires, right, that have recently taken place and the fire damage, and that always kind of is LA, right? There was like 8 fires in the time I lived there. Not as obviously as damaging as the most recent 40,000 acre fires.
No.
But
and in winter, no less. That's what got me. It's not a summer fire, it's winter. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, I remember when I lived in Orange County, and we had a huge Santa Ana fire, and the Santa Ana winds are really what fueled the big thing that happened right here. Is what people don't understand is it's not necessarily the fire that's the issue. It's the 80-mile-per-hour winds that these mountains create that funnel this air, and it's like a furnace. And so, and then you have these huge fire jumps, right? And then you have embers the size of golf balls that are flying hundreds of meters in the air and landing in a nice dry patch. And then guess what? Now you have another fire. It's tragic. We have clients that have really had a lot of struggle that are in the West Hollywood area. One of our clients, his dad and mom, who are separated, live in the Palisades. And so, both of them lost their home. And so it's just, it's a tragedy.
Yeah, it is. It is. And a friend of mine, same thing. She's a nanny, and her employers, I guess, they lost their home. Luckily, they have a second home in Hawaii, but not everybody in the Palisades is that lucky, right? This is something that we'll be talking about for a while, at least to the next news cycle, right?
Correct. It's the next thing.
Exactly, until the next thing. But I'm just kind of hoping that's it for fires this year, but we don't know.
You really don't. I mean, that's like during Katrina, when Katrina happened, and then there was another small hurricane that came through, and they were still bailing out the water, and it wasn't a devastating hurricane, but at that point in time, rainfall made things worse, right?
Exactly.
so any fire is still a fire.
Right.
And some people are lucky, like when we were down in Mexico, and my wife is getting ready to have another child in May. And so I appreciate it. We're super excited. Another boy, lock me in for 2. But what's interesting about it is, my wife, we discovered that she was high risk, and we're like, all right, well, we'll just go back to the States, right? Because we're lucky to have a fortunate circumstance where we have a home in the States, right? We just come to Napa, the horse, right? But there are people in the Palisades. People talk about all these multi-billionaires who've lost their homes and everything. Yeah, absolutely, right? However, there are people who have 3 or 4 homes, and they're really lucky. And there's those people. I know a person whose parents lived in the Palisades, and they have lived there for 65 years. And so their mortgage is twice paid over on a 30-year fixed, right? And they've had everything, but guess what? Their insurance just canceled. And so this home that they bought, what was nearly a century ago, right, has been paid off. It was, of course, I'm sure, the sum total of all their equity, right? It was their value. It's gone now, right? Everything happens. So I think that some people who are looking at the internet is a cruel place. right? And some of the
Right.
things that people are saying is insensitive to the fact that there are people who worked really, really hard to be where they were, just hard enough to live in the Palisades, right? Or they bought just early enough to live in the Palisades that do not have millions to rebuild, and they've lost everything.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people forget there was a time when values weren't so high. Henry Miller, the writer, he had a place in the Palisades. That's where he retired. So you'd be
Oh, wow.
surprised. A lot of these, back 40, 50 years. I mean, I had clients that were third generation Palisades, and they'll tell you, oh yeah, my father bought a place in Brentwood, right adjacent, and he paid 20,000 back in 1920 something, and my grandmother was mad at him. Of course, 20,000 100 years later is worth how many millions?
Right.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. People forget that for every one of those stories you have, or two or three, there's going to be one of, well, I just made it. Like everything's in the house, and that's most people, right?
Mm.
Everything is in the house primarily. And then they start building assets outside of that. That's why most people, their second biggest asset is usually 401k or something like that. But it's all about that first piece of property. And that's really where they start building up equity. And that, because of how you can leverage it, that becomes people's first financial tool.
Yeah. I mean, I myself, I've been fortunate enough, I got into the renter game for a while, but I still own my first home, right? It's paid for, right? Las Vegas, Nevada. I switched it to
area.
Right. Switched it to a 15-year, right? And just paid it down. And now it's, it's owned free and clear. And so, and that's, I will never sell that house. And so I don't care how much I think I'm successful or affluent I become, or how much money I stack away. It will always be, because I grew up really poor. So it'll always be my emergency plan, right? No matter what. Like I tell people all the time, like if all fails, I'm medically retired military, and I own a home, right? I will receive my disability, and I own my home. So if I lose everything, I will not be homeless. Like that's my claim to security, and having in the back of my mind allows me to take crazy risks, because worst case scenario, I have a 3-bedroom house, so I will keep it.
And you were smart about it, because you nailed it right in the head. Now, because you've got fail safe here, you can dial up the risk over there, right? And start to take that, because, okay, worst case scenario, I go belly up. I'm not in the street, right? Selling pencils or something like that. And by the way, thank you for your service. What branch of the military were you in?
I was in the Marine Corps. So, yeah.
Wow.
So
I was turned down by the Marine Corps, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah?
I was too heavy at the time, because I've always battled with weight. And I'm dating myself now. I was back in the 90s. And I called up the recruiting office, and they're like, how tall are you? How much do you weigh? And they told me, come back when you've lost 20 pounds.
These guys.
Yeah. And then one thing led to another. Next thing you know, I was down this track. So yeah, who knows? Who knows?
It's so funny though. I remember guys who I served with who were, I can't remember. I mean, that we went to boot camp together, and these guys were 200 and some odd pounds, because these guys had to lose. Like I was just a skinny little Benny, right? When I joined the military, like I was, soaking wet 150 pounds, right? And so like I joined the military, like I was skinny. But I learned that some of these guys, they lost like 90 pounds to join the military. And I was sitting there, I was like, wow, I can't believe it. You are so dead set on being a Marine that you are willing to suffer before we started suffering. I'm like, I wouldn't have done that at all.
I've heard of those stories too, and that's why I was kind of shocked. Like that's why I thought, I'd go to Paris Island. 13 weeks later, it'd be a slimmer, svelter me. But my friend said they probably hit their quota that month. They don't really need you. Trying again in a couple months, and then.
Well, if you'd have joined after the towers, right? Yeah. I mean, I remember going through when I joined, and it was like, okay, so we got eyes, mouth, nose, ears. All right, stand on one leg, stand on the other leg, turn around for me. Go ahead and get them. Go get them. Like you're like going through the recruiters are like, hey, tell me everything. What drugs have you done? What medications have you been on? Right. And it's like, well, I was on ADHD medication. You on it now? I'm like, no, we don't need to mention that, right? Let's let's just forget that. And then he's like, they're going to sit you all in a room. They're going to like, if you don't tell us now, this is illegal, right? And they did.
Right.
Unfortunately for them, it worked on me. I am a man of integrity, right? And so when I listened to my recruiter going into there, and I was like, all right, I'm not going to say anything. And I get in there like, who's been on your medication? I'm like, and so I had to, and he was so mad at me. You just could have shut up. You'd be in the Marine Corps right now, right? And it did delay me a couple of months, but at the same time, wasn't ready to go anyways. Like I was ready to sign up, but I wasn't ready to sign up and ready to go are two separate things.
Oh yeah. But it's also interesting you bring up where context defines reality, right? After 9/11, we were at war. We need people. Let's go, right? Versus in the 90s, the only thing going on then was Kosovo, right? That was way over there. So,
Yeah.
I mean, this was mid 90s, so already we're past Desert Storm. But yeah, I mean, then they didn't need somebody like, come back in a couple months kind of thing. So, yeah, you're right. The timing was everything when it came to
it's interesting too, because, I'd say if you joined after 2014, right? So the last 10 years, say you joined, you really didn't do much. The military has been through a huge change, and I've seen it evolved. Even my particular community, as I watch on from afar, because a lot of people who I serve with, which is crazy to think, right? They're in charge now. Very scary. Very scary. I know these men, right? You want them on that wall, right? You probably don't want them dating your daughter. And so, right? You probably don't want them teaching high school or anything like that. Definitely want them in the Marine Corps. And these guys are all like the head of the officers, head of the enlisted. They're the top of the top now. But if you join after 14 to now, there's nothing going on. It's a whole new world. There's they joined to say the war that you watched taking place as a teenager, it's done, right? We're just doing, we're basically just holding a place, basically. There were some casualties here and there. There's some mistakes here and there that led to deaths. However, there was an ongoing, actively engaged combat that was, what it had been before 2014, which is, there were firefights and sustained engagements every day. And then afterwards, it's like, yes, there are things happening. Yes, people were in harm's way and dying. However, it wasn't the same as it was the 10 years beforehand. And so it was similar to the 90s, right? You're just like, you joined the military, and maybe you joined the Marine Corps, you got to go on a boat, right? They send you to the South Pacific to visit all the ports and keep them safe, right? Or to create a presence with China, or maybe they push you through the Mediterranean to do, which, is now a hot zone with all things going on in Gaza. But that was what was interesting. A lot of people don't understand what happened in 2021 when, or was it 21? It was 22 when we pulled out of Afghanistan. They don't understand. It's like there was these kids who some of I knew these kids because they follow me online. I was giving them advice about, the paths to become a reconnaissance Marine and all this stuff. Right. And these guys were just hanging out in the Mediterranean, visiting Greece, enjoying the blue skies. And then they get an order and say, hey, you're going to Afghanistan. We're not going to Afghanistan. No, you're going to Afghanistan right now. This is not a drill. Load your rifles, gear up. And then within 24 hours, they were, evacuating the Kabul airport. And so, and that's much like it was. One of my friends was in Iraq during the invasion. Like he was there. Also, again, Mediterranean, hanging out. Right, you're sitting there in 2000. Right, you're in 2001. The world is calm. There hasn't been any conflict really. It's like Kosovo for 11 years. Nothing was going on. And all of a sudden he's like, oh, hey, by the way, we're going to invade Afghanistan. He's like, what do you mean Afghanistan? What did Afghanistan do to us? Because they didn't have TVs, right? They didn't know 9/11 happened.
So you guys had no idea.
These guys are just hanging out, right? They're still writing letters back home in 2001, right? Maybe an email was on a ship. And so they're like, what are we doing in Afghanistan? And so it was a completely different world. But I think that going forward, we're going to see. Unfortunately, I think they say we're due for one every 20 years, right? We're 3 years past due, and so that's the worrisome of the future of the youth today.
Yeah. I mean, especially with, there's been a lot of saber rattling, globally speaking, right? I mean, you've got China looking at Taiwan, Russia is tripling, quadrupling down in Ukraine. Now everyone's still looking at the Middle East conflict because what that's going to mean for energy prices, right? They had to deal with Hamas. Looks like it's going through. Wait, hold on. So we're all on edge, and I think people feel that palpably. They feel this sense of dread, sense of insecurity. The world has not been the same since lockdown. It really hasn't, in so many different ways. And one of the main was, if you think about what lockdown did, well, it separated us all. We only dealt with people we trusted because there was a real fear that I could die, right? That's what we were being told. And for some people that was true, others not so much. But then what happened? Our only window became either the close associates or social media. And social media is not a window. Social media is an algorithm. So you and I could be in the same room, looking at the same social media platform, seeing two different stories or two different views on the same story. So this is how fragment points of view, where people really talk past each other because they're laser focused on one aspect, right? Because these are judgment calls. Where do you start a story, right? That's an editorial call, right? Where does it really start? Where's the background? Where does it end? So it's interesting that you said that, these guys were kind of chilling in the Mediterranean, and they are woken up, say, hey, here's your new reality, go to it. That's kind of the general world now, right? We kind of were in this lockdown, wondering what's going on. Now we wake up in this new reality, and we're all trying to make heads or tails of it. And I think some people still are feeling a sense of whiplash. And it doesn't seem to be getting any better.
And I mean, it directly translates to the investment world, right? I was, I cut my teeth on stock trading in 2020, and I did well. I did well because of it, right? When volatility enters the market, like it just did yesterday, right? Well, regardless of what you believe your politics are, right? The truth of the matter is, I now have to follow Trump on X and Truth Social just in case he wants to put something out there that's going to wreck one of my trades. And so, but that's what happened in this world is I think my perspective, and I'd love to hear yours on this, is, before 2020, we looked externally for a lot of, we looked to established pillars for advice on finances, right? And then we go into 2020, and then we see the blockchain craze. We see the push on social media, and, we say to the moon and all these things. And now everyone's Coinbasing and buying memes and holding. Yeah. And so meme stocking. And so it went to this world where it was, oh, well, what is a financial advisor? Well, financial advisor is a person with experience, education, and an intimate understanding of a variety of investments, where it's like anyone who has a sweet background and a nice YouTube channel can not give financial advice. They can educate people, right? And then people follow them. People run with it. And I see people lose money every day on the stock market because they follow a YouTube trader.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, and not to put anybody down, but it's when someone has to make calls all the time to kind of establish, right, a following, they're going to get them wrong. And who knows which one you listen to. CF Institute did a study of, they did a Kramer portfolio, and they picked something every time he mentioned it was a buy over a year. And yeah, he underperformed the S&P. Did that change his viewership? No. People, there's an entertainment value there. People like Jim Cramer. He definitely has great charisma and great delivery. So next thing you know, you're watching, right? This is for his audience. The next thing you know, well, it's starting to make sense. You know what? Let me go here. And they know he has that influence. And so that's one of the reasons why Kramer still exists, because there are people who know, okay, he's got a loudspeaker, he can maybe help me. If you read Too Big to Fail, Sorkin's book, Aaron Ross Sorkin, he actually discusses, I think one of the opening scenes is Lehman their back was up against the wall. They brought in Kramer to maybe help tout the stock. And luckily, they showed Kramer asking the right questions, not getting answers he likes, and so he kind of backed off. That makes Kramer look good. Kramer also said Bear Stearns isn't going anywhere. So
he did say that as well. I think that's what I remember when I first started trading. I was following a trader who I appreciated, posted all their P&Ls, right?
Okay.
They posted when they entered a trade, they posted when they exited a trade, and they streamed all day while they were doing it, right? So you're like live with this person, and statistically speaking, he was right 80% of the time.
Wow.
However, right, there were people like you just said. What if you came in on a sideways day and you took some bad trades that they had also trade, and then you just happened to take the bad ones, right? And now you're like, well, I've lost all my money, and you don't have enough money to invest in the other possible winners. And and that's what people don't get all the time. You're going to win, you're going to lose, right? It's just, how are you set up for the different types of markets, the different types of presidents, right? And I think that's something that you can start diving into with, who do you niche with? Who is the type of person that you generally work with, Boris, that say, hey, that's a perfect client for me? What, risk appetite? Tell us about those people. Who is that client for you?
Good question. Thank you. Generally, I've worked with people who are either business owners or management within companies. Like, for example, I do have engineer clients, but they're generally in management positions. And why that's important is because people that are either business owners or management positions, they understand that there's a threshold of enough information where you have to make an executive decision based upon that, and then you revisit it, right? You do check it out to see how it's doing, to see whether you have to adjust course. Some people, you give them 100 days for information gathering, they'll take 101, right? There will never be enough, because a lot of times what people are trying to do, well, they're trying to kill two birds with one stone. They definitely want to secure their financial future, but they want to get rid of this sense of insecurity, right? People still feel queasy when they go into the market, right? And especially when they go into financial planning, because everybody, no matter how much money they have, can remember a bad trade, a mistake they made, and it haunts them. So everybody thinks I should be better off. So there's almost a shame sometimes where, I'm sorry that I don't have more. It's like, don't be sorry, right? I mean, we don't all start on the same level. We don't all start with the same challenges, right, through life. And not only that, sometimes people have an exaggerated sense of how much they need to really retire, depending on what that looks like. So that's one of the reasons why I like business owners and management people, or people that, they want input, they want to understand what's going on, but they don't want to get dragged down by the minutia, right? And so that's one of the reasons why we start with planning. When you take a plan, you don't get caught up in this vehicle or that portfolio manager. Hey, this guy's outperforming the S&P by 2 or 3 points a year in perpetuity. That sounds great. But how much risk do you need, right? What do you need to really match what you're trying to accomplish? And so that's why our tagline is, it's not just about the money, right? I threw that in there because, well, that's the last thing you expect to hear from someone in wealth management. But I remind people, this all started with a dream, a goal, a dream, a plan, a goal, something you were trying to accomplish, right? So let's focus on that, because the money is just the means for that, right? And, well, how much do I need? Okay, well, how much do you have in savings? How much do you have in passive income? What's paid off? What's still outstanding? And so basically what we do is we look at that and say, okay, you know what? If you take your current savings and you grow it by X amount, we get a target rate. You can live 20, 30 years, most likely, barring any extreme events, right? Extreme tail events. And we can even do scenario analysis to see, okay, if these things were to happen, how would it affect you? And that's important because, for example, say your target rate is 4%. Well, the 10 years at 4.6 right now, you can really actually hit your goal without taking a lot of risk, right? But what if
barely any?
Exactly, barely any. What if it's 7%? Well, now we got to dial up the risk a little. Right now we have to look at equities, right? So because it's more focused on the goal and not the means, it gets a lot easier, right? And then risk management becomes easier when you're focused on an annual return and not just Nvidia's going up, I got to buy it, right? I mean, one of my favorite Warren Buffett quotes, and he's got millions of them, right? But one of my favorite ones, the dumbest reason to buy stock is just because it's going up. And yeah. And
Well,
so that's,
yeah, I love that I love your client profile, and that's why I love chatting with CFAs, and we work with a lot of CFAs. And what's cool about it is that we're very similar to the idea that what we do is we save our client from the semantics of things, right? Like, we know what you want to do, how you want to achieve it, and we're here to provide you the service and the product so you can achieve that goal. But all the stuff in the background that you really don't want to handle, right? Because it does require dialing in. It does require a certain aptitude, pedigree of a person to deal with. And then you provide that to them. And, it does make sense that you have a solid relationship with business owners and managers, because what do those people do? Well, those people take input from advisors and staff all day. And so, being able to sit here and say, hey, Boris, tell me what I should do, right? They're more likely going to do it. But to hit on to the first thing you said, if you give them 100 days, they'll use 101. Oh, absolutely. I am 6 days past what my CPA and legal firm has asked me to download and upload all my documents for my taxes. If they're watching, which is probably a chance they are, I haven't received all of my my documents, but I also haven't done any uploading, right? And I probably will not. I 5 out of 5 chance that I'll probably do an extension, as I always do, just because I don't have easy taxes. However, I'm the same way. Like, you give me 10 days, I'm going to push 15. And that's the difficult thing with business owners and managers. I'm sure you're trying to pull teeth from a person who it's hard to get them in the chair sometimes.
Oh yeah. I mean, meeting at weird times and having discussions very late or very early. That's part of it. You got to roll with that part of it. What's great is that when you've got that relationship, and when you've been working with people for several years, and they start to see their plan come to fruition, and it starts to get there, you still have two emotions. A sense of wow, we're almost there, and they're feeling happy, and a sense of dread, because everybody always feels shaky taking that step into retirement, because they start thinking, you can't go back, right? Once I've gone here, I can't go back. And what happens if I'm wrong, right? What happens if Boris gets hit by a bus? What happened, right? And they start playing out these scenarios. And so 9 times out of 10, I'm going over, look, even if I get hit by a bus, you're still okay because of X, Y, and Z. The majority of my time is explaining the strategies to them so that they understand why we're doing what we're doing. I always tell them, if you don't know why we're doing, I haven't done my job, because just trust me, I've got you, is not going to make them feel better. And that's why they're coming to us. I mean, the long and the short of it, at the end of the day, they need to feel their fears assuaged, or at least attended to, for them to get a value out of dealing with an investor.
There's this woman that I saw on YouTube recently. I don't follow her, but I've seen her post a couple of times, and she said, I'll give everyone the greatest business plan in the world to solve an unmet need, or provide a service that someone themselves doesn't want to do. And the truth of the matter is, in the finance world, numbers aren't easy, right? Me and my trading partner, his husband wanted to start trading, and my buddy and I, we have 2 separate approaches to things. He's like, no, you're gonna lose all your money, don't be stupid. I'm more like, sure, why don't you paper trade, right? And just understand that you see us succeed and you think, wow, I want a piece of that, but understand, like, it took a long time and a lot of loss to learn our mistakes, right? So if you're going to do it, paper trade for a while, fake trade, right? You can just plenty of platforms out there, and I recommend Think and Swim, but with Charles Schwab's, just because they have so much live data, right? You're basically trading with the actual market. But people see it like, I want a piece of that, and they realize it's a 1% person game. the amount of math that you have to do, and you have to enjoy numbers. Like, you're not going to be a CFA unless you're like, I like investment in numbers. It's probably not going to be your person. It's the same thing. Like, I come from HR, and it just serendipitous. Like, whoa, wow, I run a people company, because the worst part about business, it's people, right? Like, I enjoy working with clients, and I enjoy working with staff members, but also the most difficult part of my day involves one of those two, if not both sometimes.
Right.
But that's my business. much like you, like, I'm tired of math. Well, you know what? I'm sorry, Boris.
No, but you nailed it. It's true. Both are the life source, life's blood of our business is people, but also our greatest liability is people. Because markets are going to do what markets are going to do. You can't get mad at them, but it's, operational people, or it's the client, changing their mind, or having a new thing come up in their life where, hey, I've got to make a left turn here. That happens sometimes too. Yeah. And when you mentioned trading, it's funny. I can't think of his name right now, but the gentleman who's written several books on the Market Wizard series, where he, interviews several different people, including the famous turtle traders, where I can't think of his last name, but this gentleman, Richard was his name, out of high school. He would use the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, became wealthy, got a name for himself, and they started saying that, oh well, he's got certain aptitudes, and he made it a point to say, no, I can teach anybody this method. And so they actually had a bet where they got, I think, 8 to 12 people. The only criterion was that they all came from separate backgrounds, none finance, and he taught them how to trend trade, to the point where a few of them are still interviewed in that Market Wizards book, and they still outperform the market. And the one thing they drive home again and again and again, risk management. You're going to have trades that go out, right? You're going to have trades that don't work. And people's biggest mistake is that they want to double and triple down. And if you have a bad trend, which happens to everybody, you're bankrupt. So one thing that these guys do is they'll put 4% idea. If it goes belly up, the next idea, 3%. That goes belly up, 2%, until the trend reverses.
I'm never, so I do supply and demand, right? Which is very boring, right? In the sense that it goes off the traditional, like when we're in a zone for demand, I'm going long, right? And when we hit an area of supply, I'm going to go short, because that's where I expect people to sell off and where I expect people to buy. And so it's very simple in the sense that, I'm not listening to news. I look at news as like a reason to push me into one of those zones. And so go, I never risk more than 5% of my account, right? At any given day. But, going into the inauguration, for example, being such a volatile time period, I expected some sort of dramatic movement, right? And so I had things high, I had things low, right? Just saying, like, okay, I expected to go low, but and guess what it did? It didn't go anywhere, right? Yeah. And I lost my premiums, and it's okay, right? I tried to roll forward and save some of them for a different day, give me more opportunity, give me more time, right? But it just, everyone can be wrong. Even the best people are wrong. Everyone can be wrong.
My trade right now is going against me. I felt like a genius, when I bought my Netflix at 185, and I saw the commodities trade stuff happen, and then I thought, yeah, we're due for correction. So, I got to put on the S&P that I have until August, until it closes out, because I didn't want to actually, short, because you got all that carrying costs. And then Trump gets elected, and I'm looking like, now I know how Michael Burry felt when he was short the housing market, in mid-2006. Like, I don't know what's going on here. So, we'll see. I'll either have a really nice pickup, if this market finally corrects, or I'll have lost carry forwards for a couple of years.
Yeah, and don't ever forget to carry those losses forward. Well, Boris, we'll take a moment here. How do we get in contact with you? Tell us, folks who are listening, how if they're interested, and they are managers, they are business owners, you're in the LA area, how they get in contact with you.
Thanks, Cody. So Amenity Wealth is the name of the firm. That's A like Apple, M like Mary, E like Echo, N like Nancy, I like Igloo, T like Tom, Y like Yellow, Wealth like money. And our phone number's there, 562-822-5840. But essentially, if you call it, you can see the website, you can see our blog posts, you can see, our social media presence. But where we get different is we don't get lost in the weeds. The conversation actually starts with, what are you trying to accomplish, right? What is the overall goal here? And then we start working backwards from there. Okay, what's that going to take? Okay, well, if that takes X amount of money in year 10, we need X amount of money today, figuring out some growth rate, right? And inflation. So as a thank you for tuning in, and if you mention Cody Hall's podcast, we can do a complimentary retirement evaluation for you, right? Which is, you bring in your Social Security statement, bring your 401k statement. We'll put it through the system, and we'll not only do a risk analysis to see, okay, you're overlapping here, maybe, diversify a bit more, because you'd be surprised. People have 5 different funds in their 401k. They're all buying the same stuff. And now, like, wait, I'm 80% Amazon? Like, well, that was good in 2020, right? But yeah, that's something where even if you decide not to work with us, it's still valuable information that can help you go forward, because it doesn't matter how good a financial plan is. No, it doesn't matter where you get it either. Here, Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch. It's all linear projections in a non-linear world, right? So you have to update it. You have to revisit it. I know it's kind of like going to the dentist, but there's no other way around it other than we make it entertaining. That's all I can say.
No, I mean, and you hit it there. It is always changing, because the elements of a linear projection is that it's great for that period in time with those particular inputs. And so that's awesome that you're offering that free analysis. I definitely would say, like Boris said, it's great to have it. Like, get it done. And who doesn't like the word free? And so, Boris, I appreciate you taking the time to join me this morning. And for all those listening, if you enjoyed folks like Boris, continue to tune in and like and follow us. If you want to get in contact with Boris, you heard his contact, rewind, hit pause, replay. If you can't, if you don't, just hit us up at info@telehelping.com. One of my team members will connect you with Boris, as we've done with others in the past. But again, Boris, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Cody. You too. Thanks for having me on. Have a great day.
Be well, everyone.
This video was brought to you by our official sponsor, Telehelping. Need support for your business? Telehelping connects you with top-tier remote staff to help you streamline operations and fuel growth. Go to telehelping.com and get started today.